And we do have some breaking news to let you know about out of the Middle East. This is a live look at Jerusalem at this hour, as we have learned that Egypt's president has announced that his country has proposed a 2-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, during which 4 hostages held in Gaza would be freed. Now, President el-Sissi spoke in Cairo, saying the proposal also includes the release of some Palestinian prisoners and the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Egypt has been a key mediator along with Qatar and the United States, but this is the first time Egypt's president has publicly proposed this type of plan. There was no immediate response from Israel or Hamas. Egypt's president says the proposal aims to, quote, move the situation forward, adding that once the 2-day ceasefire goes into effect, negotiations would continue to make it permanent. This also comes as the Israeli military said earlier today that 4 soldiers, including a military rabbi, were killed in fighting in southern Lebanon. The IDF did not provide details about the circumstances, but said 5 other personnel were severely wounded after an explosive drone and a projectile were fired from Lebanon. And I did want to share this with you. This is a social media post from the Israel War Room. And you can see right here, I'm going to drop that lower third, but you can see from this vantage point some of the missiles that Israel says Hezbollah has fired into Israel. And you can actually see the counter, the defense, striking those missiles down. Now, in a separate development, a truck rammed into a bus stop near the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, wounding 35 people. Israeli police described it as an attack and said the assailant was an Arab citizen of Israel. It occurred near the headquarters of Israel's Mossad spy agency. Now, all of this comes after Israeli warplanes attacked military targets in Iran on Saturday in response to an Iranian ballistic missile attack earlier this month. This is a live look at Jerusalem at this hour. The attacks between Israel and Iran have raised fears of a full-scale regional war pitting Israel and the United States against Iran and its militant proxies, including Hamas and Hezbollah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying Sunday that the strikes severely harmed Iran and achieved all of Israel's goals, saying, quote, the Air Force struck throughout Iran. We severely harmed Iran's defense capabilities and its ability to produce missiles that were aimed toward us. Now, in response, Iran has demanded a meeting with the United Nations Security Council, which will meet tomorrow to discuss Israel's attacks on Iran. Iran's supreme leader also saying that, quote, it is up to the authorities to determine how to convey the power and will of the Iranian people to the Israeli regime and take actions that serve the interests of this nation and country. Iran's supreme leader will be the one to make any final decision on how Iran responds. To speak more on all of this, I do want to bring in Josh Haston, who is the Middle East correspondent for Jewish News Syndicate. And Josh, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.
There is a lot to get to, a lot of breaking news developments out of the Middle East, but I do want to start off with the very latest, which is Egypt's proposal for a 2-day ceasefire deal. What can you share with us about this? We haven't heard comments from Israel or Hamas.
Yeah, that story just broke a few minutes ago. Let's just remember that Hamas has rejected each and every deal on the table. Israel is doing everything in its power to bring our hostages home, actually causing Hamas to release our hostages. That's what this is all about. So Israel's been trying ever since the beginning of the war to have our hostages released. And now you have the president of Egypt making these statements calling for a 2-day ceasefire. I have a question. Where has the president of Egypt been until now? Why hasn't he been helping the people in Gaza? Why hasn't the border been open? In any other war and any other situation across the world, when people are trying to flee the front lines of a war, neighboring countries open their borders. So we have to take el-Sissi's comments with a grain of salt. That being said, let's remember, Hamas most likely will reject this deal. As they rejected every other deal. We don't know now, unfortunately. There are 101 hostages, whether they're alive or whether they're dead. Hopefully most of them are alive, if not all of them are alive. But that being said, We don't know the situation amongst the hostages. We don't know who's holding the hostages right now. Israel took out Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza. So we're not exactly sure what the situation is with the hostages, where they are, who has them, how many are alive. So again, we have to take this with a grain of salt from the president of Egypt.
And we were hearing earlier from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that he would be open to discussions about a ceasefire. But as you mentioned, Hamas has refused to compromise, if at all. So with this breaking news that really just came down moments ago, from your standpoint, how realistic will it be for both Israel and Hamas to come to sort of some temporary agreement?
Well, as you said, the Prime Minister Netanyahu has repeatedly said that Israel is willing to undertake temporary ceasefires. That doesn't mean the end of the war, because Israel's goals have not been met. One of those is bringing back the hostages, returning the hostages. Secondly, Hamas has to be disarmed, dismantled entirely. Yes, Israel's taken out a lot of the leadership of Hamas, but you do have pockets of Hamas terrorists who have emerged, especially now in northern Gaza. So until Hamas is no longer a threat to the state of Israel, the war can end. That being said, Israel would be willing to negotiate some sort of temporary, and I stress that very, very seriously, temporary ceasefire in order to bring home hostages. If in fact it is proven that there are live hostages, please God, hopefully there are live hostages in Gaza. So Israel always willing to negotiate, always willing to talk, Hamas rejecting each and every offer time and time again.
And these negotiations, these potential negotiations come as Hezbollah has escalated its attacks. And we actually saw some video of some of the missiles. We do know that 4 Israeli soldiers were killed. We've also seen Iran now retaliate. What can you share with us about the very latest? And will Iran retaliate after those very specific targeted missiles by Israel?
Yeah, first and foremost, Iran, we have to remember, is the head of the octopus. They are controlling all these terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza. They are all funded and backed by Iran. So over the weekend, Israel, with 100 planes, flew over 1,200 miles to target specific military targets in Iran, dismantling a lot of the air defense system of Iran and targeting their ballistic missile system, their ability to produce drones. So a significant strike by the state of Israel, sending a message that we will not tolerate what Iran is doing throughout the Middle East. If you attack us, and Iran has already attacked Israel twice, we had over 200 ballistic missiles fired earlier this month, in addition to over 400 missiles and drones fired back in April. Israel will not tolerate a situation where Iran will attack the citizens, our residents of the state of Israel. So Israel responding, it was a muted response in the fact that Israel did not attack specifically the nuclear facilities, which Iran is aiming to they are aiming to obtain nuclear weapons in addition to the oil fields. We have to remember, at the end of the day, Iran could be an existential threat, could pose an existential threat to the state of Israel if they're able to acquire nuclear weapons. And also, very important for your viewers, they view Israel, Iran views Israel as the little Satan. They view the United States as the great Satan. So we're talking about not only the safety and security of my country here in Israel, we're talking about the safety and security of America. So that's very, very important, especially now as we head towards elections in the United States.
And also, I wanted to ask you about this, Iran demanding that the United Nations Security Council meet after Israel's very focused target against Iran. What would come of that, if anything?
That's absolutely comical. Iran, the biggest violator of human rights in the world, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, trying to approach the UN Security Council. What's even more funny is perhaps that the United Nations Security Council is actually considering taking on Iran's accusations. I wouldn't be surprised if it actually gets voted on because, you know, as we know, the UN has an automatic majority against the state of Israel. More resolutions in the UN were passed against Israel than every other country combined over the last year. So it wouldn't be surprising. It is comical, but they could go to the Security Council. I would hope and I would assume that the United States would veto any sort of comical resolution by Iran after their aggression over the past year, since October the 7th, against the state of Israel.
And Josh, there are so many developments. We also have the suspected terrorist attack that happened near a bus stop in Tel Aviv, 35 people injured in that. What can you share with us about the state of Israel and the mood there? Security has been heightened for so long now, and there are continued attack after attack after attack.
Yeah, so that's the dichotomy of living here in the state of Israel. You had a truck ramming incident this morning, in which an Arab citizen of the state of Israel rammed his truck, from what we know, into about 35 people. One unfortunately succumbed to his wounds just several hours ago. Another 6 in serious condition. That was in the Galilot area, the Galilot junction just north of Tel Aviv. So again, terror has been part of our existence, unfortunately, since the founding of the state of Israel, and way before that, actually, back in the 1900s, 1920s or whatnot. So we understand what terrorism is. That being said, I'm here in Judea, just south of Jerusalem, and I hear kids playing soccer on the field outside. So that's the dichotomy, rather, of what we're dealing with here. In the morning, unfortunately, there's this terrorist attack, a truck ramming deliberately into a group of people. Remember, Sunday in Israel is a work day, so you have soldiers returning to base, you have people going to work. I understand there was a group of seniors who were out on a tour. They were rammed into by this Arab Israeli, and they're doing investigations now, exactly his motives and what exactly the situation is there. But yet, I still have kids outside my window here who are playing soccer. So that's just part of the day-to-day life here in the state of Israel. But at the end of the day, we will defeat our enemies. This is a war on 7 fronts. Again, Iran, the octopus with its tentacles spread all over the Middle East, and Israel will be victorious at the end of the day, not only for our sake, but for the sake of all of humanity.
Josh, is there anything else that you would like to share with our Live Now from Fox viewers?
Yeah, you mentioned a potential Iranian response. It was very interesting today. The IDF actually postponed the induction of its latest group of soldiers today indefinitely. I don't know when that's going to happen, but there was a very great security concern for those soldiers who are coming to their bases today. I would think that perhaps that the IDF soldiers who are going to welcome them had to be elsewhere today. So there is a potential of Iran trying to strike here in Israel. And I believe that Israel's strike over the weekend is just the beginning. We targeted specific pinpointed attacks against their military infrastructure. And as I mentioned before, the next step would be to hit their nuclear weapons program, because that is an existential threat. So again, this is phase 1, I believe. And I think we're going to see another phase 2 and perhaps a phase 3 if necessary. When that happens, I don't know. But we are here waiting, anticipating a potential Iranian response. But kids are outside playing soccer, so life goes on.
Josh, as always, we do appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.